Well, welcome once again, everybody, to Rediscovering Your Passion and Purpose with Patty. I am Patty Stuhlen, and I'm the Chief Pathfinder of Pathways with Patty. And I have to say, before we get started with our wonderful guest today, I know it sounds like I just woke up. I did not. I'm having a bit of an allergic, it's seasonal allergies, and many of you out there right now, you can definitely relate to all of that. So it doesn't matter how much I've talked already this morning, that's what's going on. But it just gives me that really nice baritone sound, doesn't it? So with that, we have once again a wonderful guest with a great message. And I would like to introduce our guest right now. This week's guest is Daniela Hartmann. Her lifelong passion is to study and navigate cultures, work environments, political and spiritual belief systems worldwide. Having worked as a journalist, United Nations employee, and immersed herself for over 20 years in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, she has lived in 8 countries, in 4 continents, and traveled all over the globe. She now has woven the strands of her learnings and experiences into the grid BluePrint to assist high-performing leaders and game changers in their field of expertise to actualize their individual recipes of inner truth and guidance. In close collaboration with her clients, she guides their exploration of their personal notions of grid, growth, responsibility, integrity, and diversity to embody authentic, heart-centered leadership in a rapidly changing world. Well, Daniela, I'll tell you what, I am so excited for you to share all of this with our audience today. And it is a pleasure to have you as my guest today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
It's a beautiful autumn day here in Munich, Germany. So I'm doing great.
excellent. You can't get much better than that now, can you?
No.
Well, I'd say let's get into how you discovered your passion and purpose. Share a little bit about yourself and your story, and how you found your way through all of it to where you are today.
Well, I discovered my passion of living a very international life already with my parents. They got me moved the first time when I was 3 months old, and the second time when I was 6 months old. And then that time we moved from Germany to France, and it just continued on like that. They moved obviously a lot and got me into international schools, and I just love to explore the human experience. If you travel just as much as I do, and I've lived in so many different places, and so have you. We all come down to a sort of common humanity about
Mm-hmm.
what people need and want and expect from life, and
Right.
to explore then the different ways of how people design their lives, what's important for them. That is something that I just find absolutely fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating, as you and I have discussed just a little bit. Um, it's so wonderful to get out of your own little bubble of the world and see what is happening in the rest of the world. We know that there's a lot of not nice things that are happening, but it's nice to get out there and meet all the people that are making a difference in the world and see the beautiful things and cultures, whether it's religious or economic or any of the things that are out there, food, the places, all of it. I know for me, it excites me.
Exactly. And what I just found in all of that it's so interesting to experience oneself. And this is why I'm also so passionate about authenticity, to find our own recipe of life, and to
Hmm.
maybe taste a little bit from this culture or that culture, or this person that we meet, and then we find out who are we actually, and how do
Right.
we connect to all of these people.
Hmm.
How can we have these heartwarming conversations? How can we expand through connecting with others? But what I found is we need to be really nicely anchored in ourselves first of all. We need to understand ourselves first of all, and then it's just such an exploration to go out there and expand with others.
Yeah. So was it from an early age that you kind of discovered that you had a passion for helping other people, or is that something that developed over time, or when did you realize that you had this passion for helping others?
Well, I had a beautiful grandmother. She was like, you know, my hero, who was so kind and always so warm-hearted and so inclusive and so allowing, especially of us as her grandchildren, but to everybody. There's a flower, I think it's called gerbera, and it sometimes
Mm.
has like a metal thing stuck to its head to keep it up.
Mm-hmm.
And she would actually even take that out, you know, so the flower wouldn't be hurt.
Oh, okay.
And I just realized, because we moved so many times, how important it was to be seen, to be heard, to be validated as a person, in order just to flourish and to develop and to grow, especially in childhood. And it kind of felt important to me to give that to other people as well, you know, to have that openness and that allowance for others to feel safe when they're around me.
Mm-hmm. And so through so it came from the so basically, eh, because of the people that you were surrounded with, that helped lay that foundation, because you saw that passion in other people in your life, specifically speaking about your grandmother, that really showed you what it looked like to be passionate towards others, and to also care about them.
Yeah, and it just feels true, you know, compassion and kindness. It just feels more true to me than being harsh or mean. I mean, obviously, I have my days, and I have many of them.
Hmm.
Um, but when I go into these more, let's say, challenging moments, and I react aggressively or angry or whatever, and I hurt other people, it hurts me. That is something that I understood very early on, that there is a reflection then that's happening, and that I feel better if I'm compassionate and kind and warm-hearted. So it might even be quite selfish.
Well, it's one of those things too that depending on the experiences that we do have in our life, and we cannot help the environment from having its effects on us, whether that be positive or negative. The fact that you recognize when you are having those not so nice moments, that speaks volumes. And so does that come from how you were raised, or just things that you noticed about how people treated you, and you learning how you wanted to be treated or not treated, and knowing how to treat others?
Well, there was a moment. I mean, as in the introduction we talked about, I was for a while working with the UN, and I had other environments as well, where I was quite challenged. I was challenged in my integrity. At the UN is a very interesting and great organization in my mind, for many reasons, very, very complex. So there's good sides and bad sides, and a lot of different people working on very, very difficult subjects. But in this complexity, there was challenge for me. And so the question for me was, yes, I want to be compassionate. I don't want to be angry. You know, I want to stay in my heart and in my integrity. How do I do that in these challenging moments? And I couldn't really find a system around me that could support me or give me a path. And this is why I went into Buddhism, because their path is quite clear on meditation, introspection, contemplation, and taking responsibility for our own mind and for our own perception. And of course, outside influences are there, outside influences, you know, mold who we are, absolutely. But we have a certain degree of freedom within that, how we deal with things. You know, there is,
Hmm.
if we're aware of ourselves, there is a moment where we can say, oh, you know, I I want to react this way, or I want to be kind. How can I do that? How can I, you know, work with my perception? So that training, I lived in a monastery in South India for more than 8 years. That really helped me to hone in on that. And then I still worked in the field of translating for another 12 years. So
So,
yeah, that's
oh,
real
go ahead.
training.
So I mean, with the challenges and obstacles that you've mentioned, did you find that there were places in your life where you found that you had lost your passion and purpose on your life's journey?
Definitely. There was this one moment again at the UN, and it was all about. I was working with UNAIDS, so it was about HIV and AIDS and access to medication and who could get it and who could not get it. And again, it's very complex. I'm not faulting anybody in
Hmm.
that.
Right.
But there are many different interests and very many different big players in it, but that people couldn't get medicine in the way that they required in order to be well because of certain obstacles. That was
Hmm.
very difficult for me because I was confronted with these people. I worked with these people on an everyday basis, right? I saw them.
Hmm.
And then I was working on charitable projects all the time, even in the monastery, and then for Nepal, for a very remote area called Dolpo. And there were also a lot of challenges in working charitably, but the Western sponsors would have an idea about how they do it. The
Hmm.
Nepalis would have certain needs, and the communication was often so disturbed or unclear because they didn't want to get the sponsors angry, and the sponsors wanted to help but they didn't know the environment. So
Hmm.
often there were moments where it's like in the middle of all of this and not being able to navigate it always properly, and that sometimes is very painful, because you see
Right.
feelings hurt, even though everybody wants to help. So I had to go back into myself and see, okay, what do I really want? And how do I communicate that? How do I connect authentically without letting all the noise and all the wishes of other people disturb me, and then have clarity that I can then bring out to others? So
Hmm.
this is why authenticity is so important to me.
It's interesting that you just mentioned about, knowing that because of political issues or other issues that you were dealing with, that you want to help so many people that need the help so badly. And because of, you know, particular things, whatever that may be, that is not possible. It reminded me of one of our future guests that was going to be coming up here in a few weeks. She's down in Mexico, and she was talking about how during COVID time, where, a lot of us in the United States were really griping and complaining about not getting enough of the vaccine out. And she said it was so interesting to be down in rural Mexico, knowing that at least we were here in the United States, we were getting the vaccine, maybe not, the double dose or whatever it may be. They weren't getting anything down in Mexico. And no matter what they were doing, because there was just all of these things that were happening, that they just weren't getting it. And that reminded me how we need to really be grateful for the things that we do have, because there's so many people in the world that don't have running water, they don't have a roof over their head, they don't have the vaccines for a worldwide pandemic. And I know I can only speak for myself and for many of us here in the United States, we just really take a lot of these things for granted. And you working in the UN, I could see where you would lose your passion and purpose, because you are wanting to help all of these people, but knowing that you are one person and there is a lot of political games that have to be played, that would become very discouraging.
It Yeah, definitely. And then I kind of also understood a lot of other people in these same leadership positions. And this is why I kind of decided now to take what I've learned in these 20 years of Buddhism into a leadership level. A lot of people get into these moments where integrity is being pulled into question. We all have
Hmm.
our values, even, on an everyday level, also sometimes we have our
Right.
values. We stand up for something. It's very important to us, but, outside circumstances don't always allow for that with the people we live with or
Hmm.
whatever it is. So to come back to that and to find ways of living that or articulating it, I often found also sometimes people don't deeply connect to themselves or get blocked somewhere, and then they can't articulate what they really need. So with my clients, that's what I do. First of all, it's like almost archaeology,
Mm-hmm.
psychological archaeology. What are you standing for? What is that important for you? Just as you asked me, how did you find out that compassion was important to you? Who are your
Mm-hmm.
role models?
Mm-hmm.
So these things actually make our life then more self-determined or more self-empowered. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what I feel, at least, a lot of people are looking for right now.
So if I can back up just a little bit, what was it that intrigued you or got you interested to even, excuse me, want to, like in the introduction, it says immerse yourself over 20 years in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. What was it that drew you to that?
Well, I found that I saw some of the teachers, they embodied what I wanted to have, this absolute presence, this confidence, this all encompassing compassion, that would be compassionate even under the most difficult circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see, yeah, that was a training, and it is a deep dive into our own mind, and our own perception and our consciousness. And somehow that interests me. Philosophy interests me a lot. So I thought, okay, let's just go to a monastery for 3 months. That was
Mm-hmm.
my idea.
Mm-hmm.
I was in between jobs. I had to break up, the usual thing,
Mm-hmm.
find your way again. And the moment I was there, I could see there were 3,500 monks and 700 nuns. So we're
Wow.
talking, a town,
Yeah.
all practicing, all meditating, all reading these texts, about how to generate bodhicitta, or, the mind of enlightenment, how we create compassion, how do we understand our essence as something that is ever changing. Our consciousness is this ever changing thing,
Mm-hmm.
but is connected to everything and everybody. So how does actually even every word that we're uttering right now has some sort of result to it, some sort of
Mm-hmm.
effect? What is my responsibility in that then, if I understand that? How can I then hone my mind so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't hurt or it doesn't harm, but benefits?
Mm-hmm.
And to see that actually all of these people were working on this, and that there are these teachers who embody that was just absolutely and utterly fascinating for me. And this is why I stayed for so long.
Right. I mean, I'm assuming there's people from all over the world that are there. So I mean, it's in essence, that's almost like a little United Nations right there, because there's people that are looking for enlightenment from all over the world to take back to their part of the world. Is that what you found?
Not where I was. There's a place where the Dalai Lama lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's more international. I was in the
Gotcha.
south of India, in the middle of nowhere. Really, it was a part, a land that was kind of unused before, and it was given by the Indian government to the Tibetans. So
Mm-hmm.
there's also, you need a certain permit to even go there. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
renew that every year. But it was tough. There was no coffee shop. There was no real restaurants. There was absolutely nothing to do. And the monks and nuns didn't care about me. As long as I didn't do anything bad, I was kind of in the back row. So, and I had to learn the language. It took me 3 years to learn the language at all, to be able to attend the classes in Tibetan.
Oh my gosh.
So there was absolutely no infrastructure for Westerners. There are monasteries like that in Kathmandu. I know some. They do have international programs, but this one did not.
And what intrigued you about, well, first of all, how did you find this one? And then what was it that intrigued you so much about going to this one, especially since there was a language barrier?
Um, I got there through a friend, a Tibetan friend who lives in Switzerland, and he recommended it to me.
Mm.
And honestly, I can't even give you like an exact answer. I just felt at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's all I can tell you. It just
Mm-hmm.
made my heart sing. I
Mm-hmm.
love the simplicity of the life. I mean, I lived in one room for years,
Mm-hmm.
and you live in a mobile home, so or how's it called?
A motorhome.
Motorhome, exactly. So you understand also the beauty of having a space, you know, that is not too large, but where you can be fully yourself. So
Hmm.
I enjoyed that, but I didn't have any luxuries that we have in the West. But I cannot tell you exactly. It was just where I was supposed to be. That's how it felt.
And at the end of your time, I mean, and then when you decided to leave, was it just that because you felt like you had learned all that you needed to at that time and it was time to go? Or what was it that you finally realized, this, my time here is done?
Well, the main teacher passed away. He was called Pino Rinpoche. He had passed 2 years before I left, but things changed during that time a little bit, just the essence of it. And I had met a young Lama, a young Tibetan teacher who was expanding his work. He was Nepali originally. He had come there to study. And so I supported him then for another more than 10 years
Mm.
in translating for him, oral translation. We did a documentary about his return to this remote area in Nepal called Dolpo.
Mm.
And I supported him in opening up his associations in Germany and Switzerland and his
Mm.
charitable work.
Wow, that's fascinating. So,
Yes.
what, even though, and we'll get into your other programs, but was that all those teachings that you received during that time, is that the basis or foundation of the programs that you developed?
Yes, absolutely. The foundation, the worldview, and the philosophy, but also, of course, my own life experience as a Westerner. And what I've also looked up in or studied in the field of modern psychology, I put that in as well. And then we had a huge earthquake in Nepal 2015. I don't know if you've heard about it or remember that. It's 8 years ago now, so it's quite a
Mm-hmm.
while. But then I started to work with trauma, which fascinated me also. And in my time when I was a translator, I also worked with a lot of people who had, psychological difficulties or challenges, and who went into Buddhism in order to get support there. So there was a lot of psychological support that I've been giving for 10, 12 years now.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, when I came back here for COVID, during the COVID time, to support my parents, I saw so much need, and so many people asked me and said, "Hey, Daniela, can you support me with that?" So the foundation is Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, but you don't need to be Buddhist. It's absolutely common sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually just psychology and common sense.
So tell us how you came about and developed the grid blueprint.
Was talking to a friend of mine, or my mentor also, called Katrina Freya. We talked about, what can we do? People need support, need to find the connection to themselves, befriend themselves. That's also something that I found. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of self-hate in the
Mm.
West,
Yeah, yeah.
or, feeling unhappy with oneself, self-berating. So how can we develop that? So we went into the basis of Buddhism, and what I'd learned, and we made it into the grid. So G is growth. It's a looking into how have we become who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we think, we just we grow up, but there's so many different factors, so many moments where we took decisions, or decisions were taking for us, that got us into a certain directions. And each of us, we have our own recipe of, what motivates us, what blocks us, what supports us. So when we know this recipe of ourselves, we can actually use change for growth. We all change all
Mm-hmm.
the time, and a lot of people are afraid of change, but actually it's a treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Every single day, every moment, we can use to put our life in the direction that we want. So this is how we use the Buddhist concept of impermanence, that everything changes all the time, and that we can use the present moment. And then responsibility, the R of grid, is being aware of our own mind, of our decisions, and really take responsibility for ourselves and not blame anybody else for what happens to us and how we react. It's sometimes a bit harsh in the beginning, but we do have a choice in the moment. Sometimes not at the outside influences, but we have a choice of our mind. And when we can tame our mind, work with our mind, be aware, we can start working with that. And I just love that, because I can see, I work with my clients, I talk with them about the two kind of voices. And I believe our core always has a kind voice. And then there's the harsh voice, right? So I let people sometimes just look for 2 days. What does your kind voice say? Have a nap when you're supposed to have a nap, eat the chocolate cake when you want to, do what feels good for you and see how you blossom. It doesn't mean, and then people think they're going to get lazy or procrastinate, but actually normally they don't, usually they just feel freer. Yeah, but that's responsibility, working with our mind. And then I is integrity. What are our values and how do we live them in everyday life, is to take a deep dive into that. And D is diversity. The different people that we are, right? I mean, we are, all of us are a child to somebody, or we're a child to somebody. We're a friend, we're an employee, maybe, we're an employee, maybe, we're a client somewhere. And every time our personality changes a little bit. And we can also start to master that. And then how do we work with all of these different cultures and places that we are and circumstances that we're faced with, but stay in our integrity. Yeah, that's what I explore with people step by step. And that's great fun, because I can see, when people start to have an understanding of themselves. There's this beautiful quote by Ram Dass saying, we're all just walking each other home. So this is what I do with people. I walk them home to themselves. And I could see clients, really blossom, that when they started to find their voice, they could actually start to design their life the way they want it.
Now, do you have a specific timeline that you do the grid with everybody, or is it each individual person on their own path, their own journey, however long it takes them?
I usually don't go under 3 months. Usually 6 months, I think, is the best.
Oh, okay.
Because it's really an evolution, and I want to give people space. There's something in Tibetan, the way we study, in Tibetan Buddhism, the way we study, it's called te samgom. And te means first you study something intellectually, like a self-help book or something like that, a new concept. But then the next 2 steps, I think, are crucial. The next one is contemplation. What really fits for you? What resonates? What is really part of your life? What can you use of these things you've just learned, and how you can use them? So that's contemplation. And then some is often, is meditation. It's often translated as meditation, but it really means to become familiar with it. So it's embodiment, integrating it. So even when we know, okay, this or that behavior isn't good for me, we can know it intellectually, we can contemplate and say, really, it's not good for me. But then we have to substitute it with another kind of behavior, or figure out, why do we do it? What can we do instead? So this embodiment, this integration, I think, is crucial.
So in the grid blueprint, do you find that there is a specific area that is a little more challenging for most people than other parts of it?
There is this moment, usually during responsibility, when we look at certain habits, and there's something in psychology, we call it secondary gain. So, for example, I had a client who liked to go into victim mode. People were not answering to her the way she wanted. Her employees wouldn't show up when they were supposed to show up. And then we went into, what is the secondary gain of feeling like a victim? Because then it was always everybody else's responsibility. She was doing everything right, and that things didn't work out, was due to everybody else not showing up or not
Mm-hmm.
doing their part.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got into this point, there's often a bit of resistance because these old patterns have protected us in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Well or not well, that's another thing. And to take responsibility for that, to actually sit down, this is what I did with this client of mine, to put up proper boundaries, to figure out when is somebody supposed to be in the office and when not, and to enforce these boundaries. It was painful for everybody because they didn't know how to do it in the beginning. But then, everybody started to take their own responsibility and things got better. And when things went wrong, she had to also stand up for it. And she couldn't just blame it on her employees. But
Mm-hmm.
these moments when patterns have to change and this integration phase, that can be quite challenging. And
Mm-hmm.
when, as a coach, you kind of call them out on it,
Mm-hmm.
that's not always the biggest love moment, but usually they figure out quite quickly that it's for the, that it's a good change.
So basically you're holding a mirror up to them and they're having to look at themselves, which is not always an easy thing to do.
No, and to let go of this protection. Many of these negative habits have a sort of backstory, and to
Mm-hmm.
look at them can be very painful.
Sure. So do you work with groups of people or individual or a little of both?
Usually individual, because
Mm-hmm.
what I found, or what at the moment is the best way for me, is to really give a safe space. And in a
Mm-hmm.
group, it's not always that easy
Right.
unless people really get to know each other and they've been together for a while and they do feel like they can open up. But
Mm-hmm.
especially when we get to these painful things,
Mm-hmm.
these painful habits, I find it better one-on-one. That it's just, us. At the moment, that's what I find the easiest.
When you're working with people and they realize or discover this painful moment that they perhaps have, shoved down or just put aside, do you find that that's kind of their aha moment, that from that point forward it's kind of like the flow of energy and everything that you're working with them about seems to move along more quickly because of that aha moment?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a moment always of self-forgiveness, of forgiveness maybe of other people who were involved, wherever this pattern comes from. And, sometimes it's also just inner child work. I take people often into just meditations and, somatic work. Yeah, how does
Mm-hmm.
it feel in the body? Just to be able to stay with feelings that are uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of burn through them or see, it's uncomfortable maybe to, get your employee to come at the right time and not be the nice boss,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe we've learned that when we stand our ground we get attacked or yelled at or whatever. That was what happened with my client. She got
Mm-hmm.
backlash as a child whenever she
Oh,
stood up for herself. And how does it feel now as a grown up? Can I
right.
now do certain things that were painful or maybe even dangerous when I
Mm-hmm.
was younger? How could that be safe now? So it does take a little bit of time. And yes, when the aha moment is there, then it flows.
Do you
That's
work do you work with people of all ages, or do you find that the majority of your clients they're of a certain age area?
I would say over 45
Mm-hmm.
usually,
Mm-hmm.
because then, often certain things have accumulated
Right.
to a certain point that they do want a change.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, so that in itself, if they're wanting to work with you, they already know that something needs to change in their life, correct?
Definitely, because I do go quite deep with them.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, it's not, it's not
It's not
like
like
one, two,
somebody's
three
forcing
steps.
it's not like somebody's forcing them because somebody else knows they need a change. Because I know a lot of times as people get older, they think, well, this is just the way that I am, love me or
Mm,
leave me type of thing. And so what makes the difference is the fact that these individuals are coming to you because they know they need and want a change in their life.
definitely. And they want to take charge of their life.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be willing to say, yes, I want to be self-empowered. I want to understand myself. I want to feel myself. I don't want to feel anymore like being stuck in a life that's not really mine, or
Mm-hmm.
stuck in a relationship that, doesn't fully fit. I always take this example of having clothes you kind of grew out of, maybe a certain
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle was great when you were 25,
Mm-hmm.
but not anymore now. Or maybe, even a marriage or a relationship, a career. And when this feeling of, you're uncomfortable, but you don't really know how to get out or what else you could put on instead, that's when I come in. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because the moment you connect to yourself, you get self empowered. And then you can have presence, you can be confident because you can connect with yourself, first of all, then
Mm-hmm.
start to articulate yourself, and then connect to others properly and with clarity, and then to the outer world. I always say authenticity breeds coherence, and coherence then breeds accountability and responsibility and integrity.
Mm-hmm. So if I kind of hear, what we've talked about so far, is it almost sounds like everything that you were experiencing when you were working with the UN, that by studying the Buddhist philosophy, that you discovered the same things of the grid that you created. So the things that you were looking for and searching for, you found, and is that ultimately how you created the grid blueprint then, based on where you were, what happened with you during your time with the Buddhist culture, and what you do for others now?
Definitely, that's the main point, that I saw it works for me. That is something
Mhm.
that I embody and that I can transmit, knowing full well that it works.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, during the COVID time, I came back to Germany in 21 again to take care of my parents. But then everybody asked, they had been often by themselves for a few months or even a year by then. And I saw it worked for them,
Mhm.
and they talked then to their friends and said, hey, have a conversation with Daniela, and she can help you with meditation, and she can help you look into certain areas of your life more deeply. So I basically did that pro bono for quite a while, and I saw, oh wow, it really helps. Again, the openness needs to be there.
Mhm.
That's a foundational point. And then I saw, yes, it also takes time, because certain people, they do it for like a week or two, and then something happens and they get distracted, and 3 months later they call me and say, hey, it ain't really working, let's try
Mhm.
again.
Mhm.
So the consistency, I do think, is important.
Well, I think what's really great is knowing that this is not just something that you just put together just because, oh, I think this will be good for people. You you lived it. You walk the walk, you talk the talk, you practice what you preach. And because of that, because you know where you were and where you are now, it makes it easier for you to connect with people because you know exactly the benefits of the grid blueprint.
Absolutely, and it's just such a joy to see. Maybe it happens to you too when you work with people. The moment people feel at home with themselves,
Mm-hmm.
the moment they see themselves with, all the good, the bad, whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
they suddenly are in their body, and they're in their own power. It's just such a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is really what motivates me, to kind of see people, wow, they're
Mm-hmm.
suddenly taking charge of their life. They're suddenly themselves. They found their voice. They, found their passion again in life.
Right.
And then, so many times, and maybe it happened to you too, the moment they voice, the moment they are there in their power and in their beauty, things click around them too.
Mm-hmm.
People listen, people react, doors open,
Mm-hmm.
situations happen, that just weren't there before, or maybe they weren't seen. But and if I finish working with people after these 3 or 6 months, often it's really a different person or a more embodied person.
Right, right. Um, in your program with meditation, I know there's so many people that talk about the benefits of meditation. What can you tell our audience a little bit about what are the benefits of meditation and what are some of the ways that they can do meditation?
So in Tibetan Buddhism, we again talk about three things. Three is a very important number, but it's called view, meditation, and action. So the view is to sort of see, why are we doing this, and how does our mind actually work. So it's to kind of understand the flowing nature of our mind intellectually, first of all, and then go into the meditation and maybe the different parts. What I do when people start with, I mean, one can do whatever kind of meditation, and I've done it for so many years, I can teach all sorts. But the first one is to befriend ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to kind of understand, yeah, my mind is something that creates my world all the time. We all have judgments all day long, and ideas, and we grasp, and we have perceptions and understandings of things, and it every second it changes. So how do I start to befriend it? How do I become even aware of what I'm feeling, of what I'm thinking, and where it is leading me, right?
Right.
And to become friends with ourselves and with our body, and to understand for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, where I am, who I am, what do I embody right now. And I always say that after a little while, when you do that, you become your own sanctuary, because we start to feel ourselves more, and we can start to come back to a place of safety in ourselves, of groundedness, of awareness. And we can start to be the observer of the world that we're in, and we can start to choose on how we react. So it's a really cool process. And again, in Tibetan Buddhism, often we call it to become familiar, and then we can work on certain emotions, or on compassion, on love, on what that means to us, on how to strengthen that, and so on. And then the next point is action. So it's again view, meditation, and then action. How do I bring it into the world? What does it mean? So the way, again, how I teach meditation is set an intention. Why are we doing that? And what's happening here with our mind? Practice. And then how do we become this observer of our mind during everyday life? How do we become the master of our mind in everyday situations? So that's action. Yeah, that's what I do.
So with all of that, how does someone like me, who when I am attempting to do a meditation, I cannot seem to get the thoughts to stop. I mean, is meditation where there is nothing going on in your brain? Or with me, what do I do with all these thoughts that continue to come across when I'm just trying to silence everything?
I personally think that silencing your thoughts is completely the wrong attempt.
Okay.
I don't think it's possible, because we do have a mind that is supposed to understand what's happening around us. There's a phrase that I like, which is called open awareness. So what we do is we basically take a step back, and we start to be curious about our thoughts. So whatever you think, man, breakfast wasn't enough.
I sure am hungry.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay, but we don't need to follow it.
Okay.
And then the next one comes, well, good cup of coffee would be great as well. Oh, I should actually call my Aunt Erica. Oh, it's on my list. And it's just like looking without getting too engaged. And what you can take a support, like a flower. So you say, okay, my main attention stays with the flower.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the mind goes to the breakfast, it's like, oh, okay, thinking of breakfast. Go back to the flower.
Okay.
Oh, it's going to coffee. Go back to the flower. And then slowly, there's a little bit of a gap between you and your thoughts, or you become the observer of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a direct reaction all the time. Okay, I need breakfast. Okay, jumping up, making breakfast. Oh, and coffee. Oh, on air, where's my phone? We
Mm-hmm.
start to, and then slowly thoughts do get a bit slower,
Okay.
and they do start to just not be so loud anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the observer gets to be more present. And this is what we call presence. And I'm sure you've had people who have presence,
Yes.
who are just there, how it feels to be around them.
Right. Yes.
You're just there. And sometimes I also just work with a body. I ask people to just feel their behind on their seat, on
Mm-hmm.
the earth, give gratitude to being held and supported. That really helps against anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
because anxiety is often just a lot of thoughts about a lot of weird stuff,
Right.
which goes into the body and makes us breathe very heavily. And it's true, it's a true feeling. When you're anxious, it's painful. But
Mm-hmm.
then go into the body, slowing it down. So there are different ways. But to kind of kill all the thoughts, I've been meditating for 25 years. There's always something.
Well, that makes me feel a whole lot better. I'll tell you, thank you so much for that, for validating me on that one. Um, but I have started to find over the past year and a half, and one of my guests that I had from season one, Dr. Beverly, when I was she was talking about meditation also, she also let me know, Patty, when you go for your walks, that is a form of meditation. And I hadn't, that was an aha moment for me, because I really do find that when I am out walking, especially when I'm walking on the beach, which is my favorite, um, my thoughts, as you just said, they are much slower. And I am finding myself that I am more in the moment of what is around me. And I do find that all that outside uh, distraction, it slows down, or I don't notice it so much. So I never took that as being a form of meditation. But once she kind of pointed that out to me, I did start to notice that my walks on the beach, or my walks in general, especially if I'm walking by myself, um, that I think that's part of why I felt so much better after I got done with the walk, because in a sense it was my form of meditation, or it is my form of meditation.
Yeah, it's connecting to yourself.
Mhm.
And the moment you can connect to yourself, and you kind of familiarize yourself with that, it becomes a habit. It's really, you can find a home in yourself. Again, I just love this analogy.
Mhm.
And people from the outside, or situations, or bad headlines, or a microphone that doesn't work, or whatever it is,
Mhm.
just doesn't get you knocked over so easily
Right.
anymore. And
Yes.
then we can always draw back to this inner sanctuary and, kind of give it a second. What do I really think? How
Mhm.
does that really feel, that how this person treated me, or how they spoke with me?
Mhm.
And then we get into this moment of action again. And
Right.
we can also hone it. There are meditations on love and kindness, for example. And I love those. For example, I let people think about a moment when they experience kindness, and
Mhm.
how that just feels, to sit down and just think about what was it like last time when somebody was just nice to me.
Mhm. Yes.
And it opens our heart immediately.
Right.
It's, you know, and then we can start to harness these feelings. We can start to be more intentional about our lives, and we just don't feel so lost anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, amen to that. Very, very true. So what would you say, Daniela, is the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you?
Um, I think, let me think for 1 second. What is the best piece of advice? I do think a lot about, there's this one sentence: everybody wants to avoid suffering and everybody wants happiness or is looking for happiness. And sometimes when I get challenged, I try to be nice and compassionate, but there are moments where I'm not. And people do very weird stuff. And then I think, well, that's their twisted way of looking for happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And that always gets me to be a bit more compassionate. I might still not like what they do,
Mm-hmm.
but that's one thing. And to be kind. I
Mm-hmm.
think I really, really try to be kind because it makes me feel so warm and fuzzy inside.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that 100%. I have several t-shirts that say "Be kind" on it, and sometimes I forget that I'm wearing the shirt. And in fact, just last week I was at the store, and I don't remember what the incident was, but it was kind of like I helped somebody do something, and that one of the workers says, "You're actually practicing what is on your shirt. I think that's great." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Be kind. You were just being kind to that person." And I thought, "Oh, well, yeah." And they go, "Well, normally people aren't practicing what they're saying on their shirt," type of thing. And I know that when I first started getting these t-shirts, it really was a reminder to me, and then hopefully getting the message out to other people, because it shouldn't be such an effort, but it seems like nowadays it is such an effort for people to be kind. So I was glad that I was being kind to somebody, and I was promoting what was on my shirt, but I was actually doing it. I just wish that there was more kindness in the world. And that's one of my hopes, from this podcast, of doing this podcast, and with all of you amazing guests that I have, is that people know that there are still lots of kind people in the world.
And definitely what I just found, sometimes I'm a little bit impatient, and people, when they don't move as fast as I would want them to move, because
Hmm.
I'm doing all of this very important thing. So, and then when I realized that, because I'm trying to stay in that observer mode all day, I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, just be kind.
Yeah.
And then I actually usually go up and I say, oh, can I help you? Or can I help you pack
Hmm.
your bag? Whatever, and
Right.
then I feel so good. I
Yes.
feel so
Yes.
good.
Yes.
And if I get angry with a person, and I start mumbling or something, I just feel so bad afterwards.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's what the Dalai Lama calls, be compassionately selfish or
Mm.
intelligently selfish.
Hmm. Well, because I will say that when I left the store, my whole demeanor, everything was completely different. I mean, I'm kind just because that's the right thing to do, but that because somebody pointed it out, that they observed
Mm.
me being kind, it did change everything for me for the rest of the day.
It does, doesn't it? Isn't that
Yeah,
beautiful?
yeah, it was terrific. So, Daniela, what would you say that you're passionate about personally and professionally?
I think it's really exploring humanity and how we can actually get along. I always want to look for constructive solutions instead of blaming.
Mm-hmm.
I found that I don't know how it is in the US, but in Germany there's a lot of blame.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody always, it's this part of the
Mm-hmm.
society or that person.
Yes.
And I lack sometimes this understanding that we're just all humans. We're all just trying so hard to get through the day and have our
Mm-hmm.
family safe and food on our table and lead a good life. And I think if we would understand that better or deeper, we could find better solutions that benefit us all.
Yeah, I agree. What is your purpose personally and professionally?
I think is to bring people back to their own humanity, to their own home, so they can know who they are and act in accordance to themselves. And I think
Mhm.
when people are in harmony with themselves, they usually in harmony with their environment as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. What would you say is your superpower?
Curiosity.
Mm,
Yeah, I love to explore. I'm not
wow.
scared easy. Curiosity gets me over fear.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And it
very
makes me
good.
yeah,
That
and it
that is
makes me connect to others.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's great. How would you say that you're living your best life, or like I like to say, living your best dash?
Well, my best dash is to really be connected to myself and my inner navigation system. So I'm usually, hopefully, quite aware of what is good for me in that moment and what is not so good for me. So
Mhm.
I'm very conscious of what I eat and how much I exercise, and when I relax, and what people I'm around, and what kind of news I consume, to just be my best self.
Mhm. Are there any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience?
I think, just be kind, know yourself, go out there and love. It's a cool world, actually, the moment we get into this curiosity,
Mhm.
and listen to Patty's podcast
Right
regularly.
on. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Well, Daniela, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today. I mean, it has been a pleasure to meet with you and talk with you, and you share your words of wisdom, and to bring to our attention about your blueprint and all that goes with that. I know that there's going to be some people that once this episode is finished, they're going to want to connect with you and talk to you more about what we discussed today. How can they get in touch with you?
Thank you so much. Well, I assume my website will be linked, so it's thegrid.global, and just look at there and book a free session if you want to. I have these just coffee dates with people that I love to explore also their path. As I said, I'm very curious, so I'm always having a great time meeting with people and exploring what their life path is, and if there's anything that I can contribute to support them with that. And there's also an email that's Daniela at thegrid.global, and Daniela is written the Italian or German way with just one L. That's always the difficulty. But thegrid.global, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And for those of you that have been following along with the podcast, and those of you that don't, in the description for this podcast, if you go right to the description, right there is going to be Daniela's links that she just talked about. So that way, when you finish watching or listening to this, whichever medium you're using, you can go right to the description, hit the link, and be able to connect directly to Daniela. And Daniela, once again, I cannot thank you enough for being here and sharing yourself and just being able to be one of those people that you are definitely working on and helping to create a better world, not just for yourself, but for everyone, including me. And I want to thank you so much for your time and being here.
Well, thank you so much. And you're definitely creating a better world with this podcast and inviting people on. This is just such a wonderful time that we're able to all connect around the
Isn't
same issues. So
that
thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And yeah, kind of on a side note, this is one of the things that just fascinates me about technology, because here you are in Germany, I'm in Southern California, and we are sharing the same exact moment in time from such a great distance. This is where I believe technology is at its finest.
It is.
Well, for all of you out there listening, remember to subscribe and follow this podcast, and invite your family and friends to also subscribe to it as well. And please make sure that you or send me a comment or review on the podcast, and because that helps me to grow and make sure that I'm bringing content to you that each and every one of you want to hear. And I know that it's so inspiring to hear people how they are living their lives and how they are creating not just a better passion and purpose for themselves, but helping to create and rediscover passion and purpose in others. So don't forget that you can also check out my website at www.pathwayswithpatty.org. Sign up for a Zoom chat with me, or to get my Pathway to a New Beginning roadmap. So until we meet again, continue to live your best dash, and know that life's an adventure, and I want you to enjoy the journey, because your life matters. Thank you for joining us today, and may God bless you all.